I remember the moment like it just happened yesterday. My name's Lauren. I'm 31. And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what I was thinking that evening. It started off so ordinary, just me and my sister, Kara, sitting in the kitchen, sipping coffee and talking about life. Kara always comes over on Thursdays. It's our little ritual, a break from the chaos of work, husbands, and everything in between. Usually, we talk about harmless stuff, Netflix shows, our parents, the latest drama at her job. But that night, for reasons I still can't fully explain, I went off script. The thing is, Kara and I have always had this unspoken rule. We vent, we exaggerate, we say things we don't entirely mean because we know it's a safe space. But somehow, this time felt different. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, waiting for me to fill the silence. Or maybe it was just the mood I was in. Whatever the reason, I said it. I don't think I'd ever date Ethan if I had to do it all over again. I blurted out, my voice light but sharp enough to cut through the evening air. It wasn't a planned confession. It just tumbled out, like something I'd been holding in without even realizing it. Kara froze mid-sip, her eyes flicking up to meet mine. She didn't say anything at first, which only made me ramble more. I mean, I love him, don't get me wrong, I added quickly, as if those words would soften the blow of what I'd just admitted. But you know how he is, Kara, he's just so predictable, so passive. Sometimes it feels like I'm the only one trying anymore. The words hung between us, heavier than I expected. Kara gave me this look, half disbelief, half caution, like she wasn't sure if she should comfort me or call me out. Lauren, she finally said, her tone carefully measured, you know you don't really mean that. But the truth was, part of me did mean it. Or at least, I thought I did in the moment. It wasn't like Ethan had done anything wrong that day. In fact, he wasn't even in the same room. He was probably in the living room, scrolling through his phone like he always did after work. But that was the problem, wasn't it? He was always doing the same thing. Always steady, always predictable. And, if I was being brutally honest, it made me feel invisible. So I laughed, trying to play it off. Come on, Kara, you know what I mean. Everyone thinks about these things sometimes, right? It's not like I don't love him. I'm just saying, if I knew back then what I know now. I trailed off, not finishing the sentence because, deep down, I didn't want to admit what I was really feeling. Kara didn't laugh. She didn't even smile. She just stared at me with that wide-eyed expression. The one she used to give me when I was a teenager and made stupid decisions. Like the time I tried to dye my hair blonde with drugstore bleach and ended up looking like a patchy mess. Lauren, she said again, softer this time, you know he loves you, right? Of course I know that. I snapped, a little sharper than I intended. That's not the point. I'm just saying, sometimes I feel like I'm the only one who's still trying. It's exhausting. Before Kara could respond, the air in the room shifted. It was subtle at first, like the faintest change in pressure. But then I felt it. The kind of silence that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. I turned my head, and there he was, Ethan, standing in the doorway. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. He wasn't supposed to hear that. For a second, I thought he might say something. Yell, maybe, or demand an explanation. But he didn't. He just stood there, his face completely unreadable. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out of the kitchen. The sound of the front door closing behind him hit me like a punch to the gut. Lauren, Kara whispered, her voice urgent now. What the hell did you just do? I couldn't answer her. I was too busy trying to process what had just happened. I didn't think he'd overhear me. Or maybe, deep down, I didn't care enough to lower my voice. Either way, it was out there now. And I couldn't take it back. Don't worry about it, I said finally, forcing a laugh that felt hollow even to me. He's just being dramatic. He'll be fine. Kara didn't look convinced. And honestly, neither was I. But instead of admitting I'd messed up, I doubled down. He'll get over it, I said, waving a hand like it was no big deal. He always does. But as the minutes ticked by, and then hours, and still no sign of Ethan, I started to feel the first cracks of doubt creeping in. Where had he gone? And more importantly, was he coming back? The hours ticked by, and the house felt heavier with each passing minute. Ethan hadn't come back, not even to grab his keys or a jacket. I told myself over and over that he just needed to cool off. That he'd come home once he realized how ridiculous he was being. But as I sat on the couch scrolling aimlessly through my phone, waiting for his headlights to sweep across the driveway, a seed of doubt started to take root. This wasn't like him. Ethan didn't storm off, didn't leave things unresolved. If anything, he was the calm, grounded one. The one who usually stuck around to have the hard conversations even when I wasn't ready for them. The fact that he'd left without a word, without even looking angry, was starting to unnerve me in a way I didn't want to admit. I grabbed my phone, staring at the blank text thread with his name at the top. My thumb hovered over the keyboard before I finally typed, "Where are you?" I hit send, feeling a flicker of satisfaction that I'd reached out first. But 5 minutes passed, then 10, then an hour. No response. Kara called around 10 p.m., her voice cautious. "Have you heard from him yet?" "No," I snapped, regretting the sharpness as soon as the word left my mouth. "He's fine. He's probably just sitting in his car somewhere, pouting." Kara hesitated. "Lauren, maybe you should just apologize. You know how Ethan is. He's not the kind of guy to just walk away for no reason." "I don't owe him an apology for telling the truth," I shot back, gripping the phone tighter. It was a private conversation. He wasn't even supposed to hear it. But he did hear it, she said gently, her tone dipping just enough to let me know she was trying not to escalate things. "And you know how much he cares about you. Don't you think it might have hurt to hear you say something like that?" I ended the call before she could say more. I didn't need a lecture. Especially not from Kara. She didn't understand what it was like to feel stuck in a marriage that had started to feel more like a routine than a relationship. Ethan and I had been together for 8 years. 8. The excitement, the passion, the effort, it had all faded into this predictable, monotonous existence. Was it so wrong to want more? Still, as midnight came and went, I couldn't shake the gnawing worry that something was wrong. What if he wasn't just cooling off? What if he wasn't okay? By the time I finally crawled into bed, I'd convinced myself he'd come home while I was sleeping. But when I woke up the next morning to an empty bed and the faint sound of the wind outside, the knot in my stomach tightened. I checked my phone, still nothing. No missed calls, no texts, no sign of Ethan. I tried to tell myself it wasn't a big deal. He was fine. He had to be. Ethan wasn't the reckless type. He didn't drink too much. Didn't take risks. Didn't do anything that could land him in trouble. He was as predictable as the sunrise. But the longer he stayed gone, the harder it was to believe that. By lunchtime, I gave in and called his mom. It felt ridiculous. Like I was a teenager asking if my boyfriend had been grounded. But I didn't know what else to do. "Hey, Lauren," she answered, her voice cheerful. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, of course," I lied, trying to keep my tone casual. "Just wondering if Ethan stopped by or maybe called you." Her cheerfulness faded into concern. "No, I haven't heard from him since last weekend. Is everything all right?" "Yeah, totally fine," I said quickly, forcing a laugh. He probably just needed some space. You know how work has been stressful for him lately. It wasn't entirely a lie. Ethan's job had been weighing on him for months. And he'd mentioned feeling stretched thin more than once. Maybe that's all this was, a work thing. Maybe it had nothing to do with me at all. But as the afternoon dragged on, my irritation started to outweigh my worry. Who just leaves like that? Who doesn't text their wife back? Doesn't come home? Doesn't at least give some sort of explanation? By the time I checked our joint bank account, I was more frustrated than concerned. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Proof that he'd bought gas, food, anything to reassure me he was okay. That's when I saw it. A charge from a hotel downtown. Made just a few hours earlier. He was fine. Relief hit me first, but it was quickly swallowed by anger. He wasn't hurt or stranded or doing some soul searching in the middle of the woods. He was holed up in a hotel, hiding out like some coward who couldn't face his own wife. I grabbed my phone and started typing. I know where you are. Can we just talk? Stop being childish. But before I could hit send, I deleted the message. He didn't deserve the satisfaction of knowing I'd spent all night and half the day worrying about him. If he wanted to act like this, fine, let him have his little tantrum. That night, I stayed up later than I had the night before, waiting for him to come home. I kept glancing at the door, expecting to see it swing open, expecting him to walk in with some sheepish look on his face, muttering an apology for overreacting. But it didn't happen. By the second morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. I drove to the hotel, ignoring the gnawing feeling of desperation creeping into my chest. The lobby smelled like coffee and lemon polish, and the desk clerk greeted me with the kind of fake politeness that made my skin crawl. I'm looking for my husband, I said, trying to sound composed. Ethan Clark. He checked in yesterday. The clerk's smile didn't waver. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't disclose any information about our guests. I wanted to scream. Instead, I forced a tight smile and nodded. Thanks for nothing. As I walked back to my car, my anger gave way to something else, something heavier, darker. What was he doing here? Was he alone? And why did it feel like the ground beneath me was shifting? Like I was losing control of something I thought was unshakable? I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, the weight of the past 2 days pressing down on me. This wasn't just about what I'd said to Kara. It was more than that. This was years of resentment, of unspoken words, of little cracks that I'd ignored because I thought they'd never be big enough to break us. But now I wasn't so sure. As the sun set on the second day without Ethan, one thought kept circling in my mind. What if he wasn't coming back? By the third morning, the silence in the house was unbearable. It wasn't just the physical absence of Ethan, it was the weight of everything unsaid. The quiet had a way of amplifying my thoughts, of forcing me to replay the moment he left over and over again until I started to wonder if I had imagined the entire thing. I had been so sure he'd come back by now. Ethan wasn't the type to hold grudges or drag things out. He was steady, predictable, but this was new, and if I was being honest with myself, it scared me. I sat at the kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee in front of me, scrolling through my texts for the 100th time. Still no response. My last message, a simple, "Can we talk?" had gone unread. Or maybe he had read it and just decided I wasn't worth replying to. The thought sent a sharp pang through my chest. Kara called again around noon. I almost didn't answer, but the weight of the silence in the house made me crave any kind of distraction. Still no word from Ethan? She asked, skipping the pleasantries. No, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. I went to the hotel yesterday. They wouldn't tell me anything. Lauren? Kara hesitated, and I could already tell she was about to say something I didn't want to hear. Have you thought about what you're going to say if he does come back? I bristled. What do you mean? If he's coming back, he just needs time to cool off. Kara sighed, and the sound of it sent a flicker of irritation through me. I'm just saying, maybe you should think about why he left in the first place. This isn't just about what you said. Lauren, you know that, right? Of course I know that. I snapped, but the words felt hollow even to me. Look, I don't need a lecture right now. Okay? I just need to figure out what to do next. But the truth was, I didn't know what to do. Every attempt I made to reach out to Ethan felt like shouting into a void. And the longer he stayed away, the more I started to wonder if this time was different. If this time, I'd finally pushed him too far. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, my frustration had given way to something else. Fear. What if he wasn't coming back? What if he'd finally decided he'd had enough? The thought wrapped itself around my chest like a vice, making it hard to breathe. I called his mom again, hoping for some kind of reassurance. But she hadn't heard from him either. Her voice was tinged with worry, and I hated the way it made my stomach twist. If even she didn't know where he was, what did that mean? Desperate for answers, I found myself scrolling through his Instagram, something I hadn't done in years. His profile was exactly as I remembered, neatly curated, full of pictures of us at family gatherings, vacations, and random snapshots of his woodworking projects. But as I stared at the smiling faces frozen in time, I couldn't shake the feeling that they belonged to someone else. Someone happier. Someone who hadn't let their marriage fall apart. I clicked out of the app and opened our bank account again, half hoping I'd find another hotel charge or some other clue about where he was. But there was nothing new. Just the same charge from 2 days ago, mocking me with its presence. He was out there, somewhere, and I was stuck here, drowning in my own thoughts. That night, I stayed up late again. Unable to sleep, I paced the living room, my mind racing with 1,000 possibilities. Where was he? What was he thinking? Was he even alone? The thought of him being with someone else sent a flash of anger through me. Ethan wasn't that kind of guy, I knew that. But the longer he stayed gone, the more my mind twisted itself into knots, conjuring up scenarios I didn't want to imagine. Around midnight, I heard the faint rumble of a car engine outside. My heart leapt, and I rushed to the window, half expecting to see Ethan's truck in the driveway. But it was just the neighbors coming home, their headlights cutting through the dark before disappearing again. I sank back onto the couch, the weight of disappointment pressing down on me. What was I doing? Sitting here, waiting for him like some lovesick teenager? It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was supposed to be the strong one, the one who didn't need anyone. But now, for the first time in years, I felt small, vulnerable, alone. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of the front door opening. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. But then I heard the familiar sound of his keys hitting the counter. And my heart jumped into my throat. I stumbled out of bed, my pulse racing, and found him standing in the kitchen. He looked different. His shoulders were squared, his posture straighter. He wasn't slouching the way he usually did after a long day at work. And his face was unreadable. "Ethan," I said, my voice shaky, "you're back." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he set down his bag and turned to face me, his expression calm but distant. It was the kind of look that made my stomach churn because I couldn't tell what he was thinking. "We need to talk," he said finally, his voice steady but firm. "Yeah, no kidding," I shot back, my nerves making me defensive. "You disappeared for 3 days. Ethan, what the hell?" "I needed space," he said simply, his tone so measured it only made me angrier. "Space?" I repeated, folding my arms across my chest. "You don't just walk out and ignore your wife for 3 days because you need space. That's not how this works." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Lauren, this isn't just about the past 3 days. It's about everything. The way we've been. The way you've been." "Me?" I snapped, my voice rising. "You're seriously going to stand there and make this about me?" "Yeah, I am," he said, his voice calm but unyielding. "Because this isn't the first time you've said something like that. And it's not the first time I've felt like I'm not enough for you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I opened my mouth to respond. But he kept going. "I've been trying, Lauren. I've been trying so damn hard to make this work. But you," he paused, his voice catching for the first time. "You don't see me anymore. All you see are the things you think I should be." "That's not fair," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Isn't it?" he countered, his eyes locking onto mine. "You said it yourself. If you could go back, you wouldn't choose me. Do you know how that feels? To hear the person you love say that?" I didn't know what to say. The lump in my throat was too big, and the guilt was too heavy. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I didn't mean it. But deep down, I wasn't sure that was true. "Ethan," I started, but he shook his head. "I can't do this right now," he said, grabbing his bag again. "I need more time." And with that, he walked out the door, leaving me standing there, the weight of my own words crushing me. The house felt emptier than it ever had before. Even after Ethan left the second time, I kept expecting to hear his footsteps on the stairs or the soft rustle of his bag as he set it down in the hallway. But the silence was unrelenting, pressing against me like a weight I couldn't shake. I sat on the couch for hours after he walked out, staring at the door as if I could will him to come back. But he didn't. This time, I wasn't sure he ever would. For the next few days, I threw myself into distractions, cleaning, working late, even calling Kara more often than usual. But no matter how busy I tried to keep myself, the knot in my stomach wouldn't go away. Ethan was gone, and for the first time, it felt permanent. When I finally heard from him, it wasn't the way I'd hoped. A text lit up my phone on a Friday afternoon. "I'll be by tomorrow to grab some of my things." That was it. No, "How are you?" No, "Can we talk?" Just a cold, clinical message that felt like a punch to the gut. I stared at the screen for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to text back something snarky, to make him feel as hurt and confused as I did. But another part of me, one I wasn't ready to admit existed, just wanted to beg him to come home. In the end, I didn't reply. The next day, I found myself pacing the living room, glancing at the clock every few minutes. He said he'd be here by noon, but by 12:30, there was still no sign of him. I told myself I didn't care, that I wasn't waiting for him. But the way my heart leapt at every sound outside told a different story. When his truck finally pulled into the driveway, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I opened the door before he could knock, catching him mid-step. "Hey," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "Hey," he replied, his tone polite but distant. He looked different. His beard was neatly trimmed, and he was wearing a fitted shirt I didn't recognize. He looked good, better than he had in years, and the realization hit me like a slap. He walked past me without waiting for an invitation, heading straight for the bedroom. I followed, unsure of what to say but desperate to fill the silence. "So," I started, leaning against the doorframe as he began packing a duffel bag with his clothes. "How have you been?" He didn't look up. "Fine." Just one word. Flat. Emotionless. "Fine?" I repeated, forcing a laugh. "That's it? You disappear for a week, and all you have to say is, 'Fine.'" Ethan paused, his hands stilling for a moment before he zipped the bag and turned to face me. "What do you want me to say, Lauren? That I've been miserable? That I've been sitting in a hotel room crying over everything that's happened?" I opened my mouth to respond, but he didn't give me the chance. "I'm not going to do that," he said firmly. "Not anymore." His words hit me harder than I expected, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. "So that's it?" I asked finally, my voice trembling. "You're just done?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what I am, Lauren. All I know is that I can't keep doing this. I can't keep trying to make you happy when it feels like nothing I do is ever good enough." "That's not fair," I shot back, the frustration bubbling up before I could stop it. "You make it sound like I'm some horrible person who doesn't care about you." "I never said you didn't care," he replied, his tone calm but unwavering. "But caring isn't enough, is it? Not when you spend more time criticizing me than appreciating me. Not when you say things like you wouldn't have chosen me if you could go back." I felt the tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. "I didn't mean that, Ethan. You know I didn't." "Do I?" he asked, his eyes locking onto mine. "Because it sure felt like you meant it." The lump in my throat grew, and for the first time, I didn't have a snappy comeback or a deflection ready. I started, but the words died in my throat. "You just what?" he pressed, his voice softening slightly. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know why I said it. I don't know why I've been acting this way. I feel like everything's been falling apart, and I don't know how to fix it." Ethan sighed again, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, pity. Maybe, or regret. "I don't think this is something you can just fix, Lauren," he said quietly. "It's not about saying the right thing or apologizing. It's about how we treat each other. And right now, I don't think either of us has been doing a very good job of that." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but deep down, I knew he wasn't. "So what happens now?" I asked, my voice cracking. He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think we both need some time to figure that out." As he slung the duffel bag over his shoulder and headed for the door, I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest. "Ethan," I called after him, my voice trembling. He stopped but didn't turn around. I love you," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. For a moment, he stood there, his back to me, and I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd turn around and say it back. But he didn't. "Take care of yourself, Lauren," he said quietly before walking out the door. That night, the house felt emptier than it ever had. The sound of the door closing behind him echoed in my mind. A haunting reminder of the man I'd taken for granted for so long. For the first time, I wasn't sure if I could fix this. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I deserved to. Weeks passed, but the weight of Ethan's absence hadn't lifted. The house still felt suffocatingly quiet, even with the TV on or music playing in the background. Every time I walked into the kitchen and saw his coffee mug still sitting in the cabinet, a pang of regret hit me. I hadn't moved anything of his, not his shoes by the door, not the worn jacket on the back of the chair in the hallway. It was like I was waiting for him to come back, even though I knew deep down that he wasn't going to. His text messages had been polite but distant, like he was addressing a stranger instead of the woman he'd spent 8 years building a life with. "Hope you're doing okay. I'll stop by next week to grab a few more things." That was all I got. No anger, no accusations, but no warmth either. It was the kind of distance that told me this wasn't just a break, it was a goodbye. I tried to distract myself. I threw myself into work, signed up for yoga classes, and even let Kara drag me out to a wine bar one night. But no matter where I went or what I did, my thoughts always drifted back to him. I kept replaying our last conversation in my mind, picking apart every word, every pause, every look on his face. The way his voice had cracked when he said he couldn't keep trying to make me happy. The way he didn't say, "I love you," back when I told him I did. The hardest part wasn't just that he was gone. It was the realization that I had pushed him away, brick by brick, with every criticism, every unkind word, every moment I took him for granted. And now, someone else might be picking up the pieces of the man I had broken. It was a Thursday afternoon when I saw him again. I hadn't planned to be in that coffee shop. I was supposed to be at home finishing up a work project. But the silence in the house had become unbearable. The coffee shop was noisy, bustling with students and professionals typing away on their laptops, and I thought it might help drown out the thoughts swirling in my head. I was waiting for my latte when I heard his laugh. I froze, the sound both familiar and jarring. Turning toward the sound, I spotted him sitting at a corner table, leaning slightly forward as he spoke to a woman I didn't recognize. She wasn't stunning, but there was an effortless kind of beauty to her. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she wore a simple white blouse that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. She was laughing at something Ethan had said, and the sight of his smile, wide, genuine, unburdened, made my stomach twist into a knot. He looked happy, happier than I'd seen him in years. I stood there, frozen, unsure whether to approach him or leave before he noticed me. My fingers gripped the edge of the counter as I tried to steady my breathing. What was I supposed to do? Interrupt his conversation? Demand answers? Beg him to come home? None of those options felt right. But standing there like a statue didn't either. He glanced up then, as if sensing my presence. For a moment, our eyes met, and the air seemed to still. His smile faltered, but only for a second. He gave me a small nod, a polite acknowledgement, and then turned his attention back to the woman across from him. It was like I was a ghost, something he'd already moved past. I left the coffee shop without my latte. The sight of him with her, laughing and smiling like nothing had ever happened, felt like a knife to the chest. It wasn't just jealousy, it was something deeper. A realization that I had spent so much time criticizing him, tearing him down, that I hadn't stopped to see the man he really was. The man who had loved me through all of my flaws, my impulsiveness, my selfishness, and now, someone else got to see that version of him. Someone else got to laugh at his jokes, hear his stories, and sit across from him like he was the most important person in the room. That night, I sat on the couch staring at the blank TV screen, the weight of my mistakes pressing down on me like a tidal wave. I had always thought of Ethan as predictable, steady, someone who would always be there no matter what. I had taken his love for granted, assuming it was something unconditional, something unshakable. But love doesn't work like that. It's not infinite, it's something you have to nurture, protect, and fight for, and I hadn't done any of those things. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alone, not just because Ethan was gone, but because I had pushed him away with my own words and actions. I had made him feel small, invisible, unworthy, and now, he was finding someone else who made him feel seen. I wanted to call him, to tell him I was sorry, to beg him to give us another chance. But what could I even say? That I didn't mean the things I'd said? That I was ready to change? It all felt hollow, like too little, too late, and maybe it was. As I sat there, the house around me dark and quiet, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. This wasn't just about Ethan. This was about me, about the way I'd let my own insecurities, my own fears, poison the relationship we'd built together. If I couldn't figure out how to fix that, then even if Ethan did come back, nothing would really change. And so, for the first time in weeks, I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't text him or call him or try to find some excuse to make him talk to me. Instead, I sat with the weight of my own choices, finally ready to face them. For better or worse, Ethan had chosen himself, and now, it was time for me to do the same. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Your support means the world to us and helps us create even better videos. Be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. We've got so much more in store for you. And as always, feel free to leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.